For some reason, I just closed the program. Alright. Yeah, I can't have that backwards. How the hell? I'm gonna have to look it up. Right click. I see. Transform. Flip horizontal. There we go. There's my right hand. There's my left hand. Oops. There we go. Alright, so yeah, from left to right. From left to right. If I'm gesturing from beginning to end, it's gotta be that way. Anyway, alright. It's gonna be, yeah. So, obviously the key thing in Super Collider is the synth and the synth def. That is the only thing that can make sound. So, oh, you motherfucker. Wait, is it still broadcasting? It said that it quit. I think it's still broadcasting. Anyway. I lost my train of thought. So, the synth is the only thing that can make noise. And so, the synth is sort of the central piece of this system. There is a wrapper for the synth, and we'll get into what that does in a second. I'm going to stop saying I'm going to speak better. So, I started this broadcast when I finally figured out, oh, everything can just be on the server. And it's a little bit of a pain to put everything on the server. It's a little obtuse. You have to do some more steps. You have to keep track of some things. But once you put everything on the server, then, and this is the key, and this has been my key insight for 15 years, 19 years now, freshman year of college, music history, Elizabeth Seitz, learning about what do they call it? Total serialism. The music of which I think mostly is just god awful to my ears. It's fine if other people like it. I'm sure there's something there. I'm not sure, but other people seem to enjoy it, and that's fine. To me, I dislike it. it I don't find it aesthetically pleasing, of course. Well, maybe not, of course, but I don't. And more than that, I find it sort of philosophically off-putting or just plain incorrect. Um, it's just, it had the feeling of math more than art. And I like math, but that's not what music is for, in my opinion. That's not what my music is for, so that's fine. However, what I found so interesting 19 years ago was their development assumption, I don't know, that you could take all the different parameters of music, pitch, timbre, uh, what else did they use? Rhythm, uh, whatever else. All these different parameters, um, and treat them independently. Now, I found that something about that so fascinating, and I guess sort of from that point, I think that those composers, your Stockhausens specifically, who wrote "Who Cares If You Listen"? I want to say it's Babbitt, but yeah, Milton Babbitt. Okay. Um, you know, I disagree with. I don't feel that. Rather, I don't feel that way. I care if people listen. I know that's a thing that somebody's blog or whatever, but I do, and I care if you're moved by it more than just listening. Like, I want you to be moved. I want people to be moved by the music. I want to create meaning in people's lives, and I want to create connection. This all came later. I didn't understand that at all at the time, but I knew something was missing. Anyway, but I found that idea so fascinating that you could separate the parameters, um, and treat them completely separately. And then as I discovered sort of computer music, I realized, like, oh, you could really make some crazy sound worlds. In this time, I was like very much in like an abstract expressionist sort of composing mindset, but I'm certainly through the influence of Marty, but everybody in the new music, Boston new music scene for sure. Um, um, anyway, I found that very fascinating and sort of like a real eye-opening, horizon-widening sort of thing. Um, however, the more you break things apart, the more there is to keep track of. It's as simple as that. And so I guess what I saw at some point, not, I don't know if it was as I was trying to learn C sound, not really learning, but trying to learn C sound way back when I was 23 or something. No, before that, at the conservatory when I was, I don't know, 21 or something. I was trying to fuck with C Sound, and I don't think I realized it then. I think it wasn't really until I got to Super Collider in Miami um, that I realized, like, oh, this program could create really, really wild uh, sort of counterintuitive, not counterintuitive, but like not immediately obvious connections between different parameters, and you can create this like sort of connection space really between parameters. I didn't have the words for it then. I'm not even sure that that's the right word, but um, don't say Yeah. So, well, is that true? I don't know that I started with sort of the connection space idea. Well, it's in there. It's all sort of jumbled around, and different pieces of it sort of like poke their heads up at different times in my journey here. But uh, one of the things I was also fascinated with, besides the para- parameterization, was just just intonation, um, different tuning systems, uh, which is why I was so devastated to lose Harry Partch's book, Genesis of a Music, um, because it really was. I mean, that was the textbook we used in my tuning and temperament class with Jim Dalton, and yeah, that was one of the most formative books. And I didn't even read anywhere close to half. I read like 4 chapters, maybe, but they changed my life and changed what I thought. What just changed my whole perspective. Anyway, meanwhile, this whole time I've sort of had like this one man band thing, both just playing solo. I mean, part of it is just my social isolation. Um, but anyway, uh, so yeah, where was I going with that? So, right. So, why, what's the connection between the revelation I had in music history class about total serialism, sort of, even at the time, I know for sure at the time I was like, oh, they missed it. Like, like the Schoenberg's work, like, got them to like, oh, we can treat this like number, like just math, and we could do all sorts of different crazy stuff. And then they didn't choose. That was what was so frustrating. I mean, I guess it's not super accurate to say that like they didn't choose, but the row, it just doesn't lend itself to expression, because what it does is it enforces equality. It is it is sort of like a Marxist kind of like idea of how to deal with pitch originally. Like, all pitches are created equal. They're all the same. We have this equal temperament. So what's the difference? All the intervals are identical. So why should one be more prominent than the other? And the answer is, of course, because without differentiation, without values, I'm getting very philosophical here, but it is true. They're the same idea of like without a dominant set of pitches from which the all the other pitches are distinguished, then it's just stasis. And they make it very sort of glittery stasis, but harmonically it's static. That all that music is just static harmonically to me, and that doesn't interest me in the least. And I thought that was a giant missed opportunity. And I know, was it Hindemith that was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna use like a 5-note row or whatever. I forget, but he did something clever that was like right along those same lines. Anyway, I can't believe I remember so much. This is good. This is more for me to like record my thoughts just for an archive for myself than for actually thinking anybody's. Well, I know nobody's listening right now, but okay. So I'll get better at this broadcasting thing. Okay, so again, what's the connection between my sort of revelation of, yes, this separation of parameters opens up this giant space and you could do all sorts of cool things if one were to experiment and then value one over another. If one were to do that, you might find the more expressive pieces. Anyway, that was sort of the seed of the idea. Plus the Just Intonation stuff, and then also Colin Nancaro fucking was a big deal, and just my obsession with like very cool, like especially multimetric stuff, rhythmic ambiguity, and then of course, just so I don't forget, before I discovered Super Collider, right before I discovered Super Collider, I wrote Earthquakes, and Earthquakes is a process piece. The so I don't remember all the processes I used, but a big chunk of it is a set of notes, which is a scale that's, I forget exactly how wide it is, but it's wider than an octave. It's it's at least 2 octaves. It might have been 4. I think it was 4 octaves. Just like, these are the notes that I'm gonna use, and it's like, I forget, it was like 6 per octave or something like that. Maybe not even. Maybe like 5 per octave. Is it? I can't remember. Anyway, there was 24 to 27 notes, somewhere around there. And then I used different sort of mathematical processes to derive material from that. And I found that to be an extremely powerful way to work. I also found it extremely slow to do by hand. And I was starting to learn how to program. And so I thought, oh, I can do this on the computer. And then Chuck Mason, I mean, first of all, shout out fucking John McDonald. The best. Just, I love that man. And what he did to make Earthquakes happen is just still the coolest thing. And I just wish there were people there to fucking hear it. Or people to listen to the recording. Anyway. that piece was a process piece. For Masako was a process piece based on John's uh, gift. Well, he let me borrow it, and I never gave it back. Uh, of what was it? Self-similar melodies. I don't remember the author, but and when yes, that's a key point of the story. When John gave me that book, lent me that book, I connected it immediately because it only dealt with pitch, if as far as I recall. Maybe dynamics, um, maybe rhythm. I guess rhythm was sort of also in there. But it was self-similar melodies, and they were linear lines. But I realized, like, oh, anything can be this way. And also, by the way, so much music is this way already, whether they meant it or they just recognized it subconsciously or whatever. Obviously, in the case of, like, say, Beethoven's Fifth, well, maybe it's not obvious. It's obvious to me. I mean, that's self-similar in a bunch of different ways. I forget what they were, but it's there. Anyway, and so I combined the self-similar melodies idea of this idea of like processes as ways to generate not just to fill space on the page, but to generate a series of events that are sort of, well, the thing about the self-similar melodies is that they do, and he puts it pretty well in that book, and I'm not going to put it as eloquently maybe, but they do have a sort of a visceral, a hearable logic to them. Some more than others, I'm sure. And it's a really interesting thing that happens. The same. I mean, it's the same concept as the cellular automata being having a character where, yeah, okay, some of them turn black, some of them turn white, some of them have a texture, and you can see the texture, and say like, oh, that's either, I don't know the numbers of them, but like that's either, you know, now I even forget the guy's name. It doesn't matter. It does to me. Wolfram, Stephen Wolfram. I forget what his like categorization of those cellular automata are, but it's whatever. It's either like CA78 or it's whatever. It's some binary thing, but you can see it. You can see the texture. It's recognizable, even though you can't predict what's going to happen. You can see it, and it's the same thing with process music. It's the same thing with these self-similar melodies, and hypothetically, this is my hypothesis. We'll see if it. I mean, I'm gonna act as if it's true, probably. So, whatever. And who knows? Is it the process or is it just the ones that I pick? Who knows? Nobody will ever know. It's both. It's probably both. It's so interesting. Everything's the same. Everything's the same. Life is the same as music, is the same as literature, is the same as baseball, is the same as... It's crazy. Anyway. So, still in frame here. So at Tufts, I got this book, Self Similar Melodies by whoever, and it I combined that idea with this idea of the parameterization. I think I had some rhythmic processes in there too. Obviously in For Masako, there's like a subtraction process that happened, a translation process which was real simple. I just sort of went up the barber pole, so to speak. But yeah, so now I'm doing this process music, and I know that I'm doing it wrong. I know that like it's this is not meant to be done by hand. And there's these things called computers that you can learn to program that'll do all this stuff for you. And then instead of spending 8 months, exploring one system of harmony, I could spend, you know, 1 month exploring 800 different ones. And that's what I wanted to do. And then I discovered Super Collider. And immediately, pretty much immediately, I knew this is how I do it. Maybe I don't remember exactly thinking about C Sound as the way, but I remember for sure after maybe 3 or 4 weeks of learning Super Collider and being like, oh, I see, like this can do anything. I didn't know how to do everything, but I knew that it could do everything as a universal fucking musical explainer, whatever. Uh, yeah, and I knew like this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna learn. Oh, by the way, also I learned all about the history of electronic music and heard some very cool music that, like, say John Chowning made, or I don't know. Now all that early electronic music is like, I don't know. I don't remember the names. The French guy, whatever. I'm not in a particularly memory conducive state, but the point is that those motherfuckers would, I mean, move from their fucking hometown to Darmstadt. Excuse my spitting. To get access to, like, you know, the equivalent of like a tenth of an Arduino Uno. Like that's how much they could do, and they made a bunch of cool music. Um, who's the fucking music concrete guy? What the fuck is his name? He's French. I mean, how many French names are there? Anyway, Pierre is something that's ringing a bell. So yeah, and then when I saw Super Collider, I said like, oh, first of all, this is how I can do my process music. Like I don't have to do it in Python. I can do it in Super Collider Live, even. And I don't have to beg people to play my music. I don't have to pay them, most importantly, because at the time I could not imagine possibly having any money to pay people with, or whatever. Maybe I just couldn't get my brain around getting my shit together. But whatever it was, I realized I could. Oh! And then Xenakis. Right. And then I read Xenakis. And he put a point on it. And I thought, he was on to this. What a brilliant fucking mind that guy had. Holy shit. He is for sure one of my greatest heroes. I don't even want to say musical heroes, just human heroes. Man. I forget what the name of his book is. I gotta look it up. It's so. Oh, fuck. I'll be right back. Alright. So, that Xenakis book is Formalized Music. And to be quite honest, I did not read the whole thing. Again, another book that changed, of all the books, that changed my life. I never even owned this one. I had a photocopy of it. Which, for a fucking private university with that much money, you can't pay the fucking publishers. Maybe they do. Anyway. But I had a photocopy of this book, and it is fucking hard to understand. Maybe I could understand it now. I bet I could understand it now a whole lot better. But it was tough to get through. But I worked through a big chunk of it. I think basically the first half. I think it's about 200 pages. I think I got 100 pages through. And I got to the part where he basically outlined, like, God, I wish I could remember the quote, but it's like, in the future, composers will compose with gesture, God, I can't remember what the quote is. It's so good. And that was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to basically he didn't say it in these words, but what he said was, with technology, will be able to automate this lower level stuff that we're doing now, this choosing of notes, this choosing of rhythms, this choosing of, you know, anything, um, on the small scale, and we'll be able, and what we'll be able to do is compose at a higher level, much very similar to how programming languages work. You know, like at one point we were writing machine code, and Xenox's time maybe was Basic or C, you know, uh, and he was like, pretty soon we'll be working with at a level above this, and he was absolutely right. It's such a cool idea, and the degree to which I had already come up with it, or I adopted it, is a little bit unclear to me now. I know those things, the parameter, uh, mixing the split parameters idea with the process music that I was doing. Had really sort of created like a thing where I was like, oh, I could really do some very. I may have still been thinking about just composing. I don't know if I thought about it live yet. I think the it was when Super Collider and I read that Xenakis book. So sorry. We'll be back. All right. So, yeah, that one paragraph I can still see. Yeah, it like starts at the bottom of, well, who knows what it is in the real book, but in my photocopy, Xerox, it starts on the bottom of the left page that was stapled up here and then continues here. I can still see the shape of the paragraph, even though I can't remember the words. And it just basically said, in the future, we're gonna, you know, be composing at a higher level, meaning technically, not like better necessarily, but at a technically higher level, the same way that Python is a higher level than C++ is a higher level than machine code. And then Xenakis made some systems to do that. I don't, the technology wasn't quite there yet. It is now. And then when Chuck Mason introduced me to Super Collider, holy fuck, dude! I was like, oh, well, this is it. This is the technology that Xenakis was missing to do this. And by the way, I wanted to mention earlier, and I got distracted. Fucking Scriabin. Now, didn't have anything to do with process music, but he was my first real, like, well, yeah, even before Stravinsky, because I don't think I really got Stravinsky until, a couple years later. Maybe till after Scriabin. No, that's not true. I was trouble. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was about the same time. Is the point? That's not the point at all. The point is, he was one of my very, very earliest influences, and man, that first piano piece I wrote at the conservatory was a little bit trying to be Scriabin, I think. Man, if I knew then what I know now, whew, buddy. What an old man thing to say. But yeah, the thing about Scriabin was, his first few sonatas. This is how I remember it anyway. Of course, it's been 20 years since I really, 15 since I probably last listened to him, and 20 since I really went through that phase. His first few, big pieces, piano sonatas were, which is all I ever listened to. Pretty tonal, and then he got very weird harmonically and rhythmically too, if I recall. I really should revisit that music, but God, I wish this light wasn't so bad. Anyway, whatever. It is what it is. If I lean back, it's not terrible. If I just move back, that might be worse. That's better. Like this. All right. So yeah, and he got real weird. He got real weird harmonically, and I loved the sound of that music. I just fucking loved the sound of that music. And of course, Time Out as was maybe my very first influence of like loving weird times. That sticks with me. And just exploring different ways to control time and organize it. I mean, that is sort of the thing about music. Why we have to do it one of 3 or 4 different ways all the time. I mean, I'm open to the idea that there's a good reason for it, but we'll find out. Yeah. And Scriabin was for sure a big influence in the song, at the very least, the aesthetics of the pitch structure in Earthquakes. For sure. There's no question about that. That big 4-octave scale, to me, it's my version of, Scriabin's harmony or whatever. It was different than that and whatever, but very much, I think just aesthetically, sort of in that same, expressively in that same sort of vein. Anyway, how did I get on Scriabin? He's not, well, he's part of my story, but so I discover Super Collider. I read this Xenakis book, really just the one chapter, similar to Genesis of Music. There's a few chapters in there that are really changed my life, and they're actually very similar books where they really focus a lot on, like, this is how my music works. And that's interesting, but it gets so obtuse and, like, really hard to parse. Maybe it's not obtuse. Maybe it's just complex, which I don't always find, which I almost never find to be musically beneficial. Anyway, so that's my vision of, like, I'm going to fulfill this dream of Xenakis in this paragraph, and I'll find it at some point. It's covered with soot now, but it's easy to find. I'm going to create that because first of all, it's already basically here. The Super Collider is the technology which makes that possible. It's not quite there yet. You have to program it. It's not a program. It really is a programming. It is a programming language. Anyway, let's not get into defining exactly what Super Collider is. It's a couple of different things rolled into one. So yeah, I have this vision, and at the same time, I'm also sort of, like, invested, obviously, in, like, being a composer. I mean, literally invested, like, really in debt to this idea, literally. And so, at the same time, I was thinking, Well, yes, I could do it in Super Collider, but I don't know how to use Super Collider. So it's going to be a while, is I guess sort of what I was thinking. But I do know how to write Python code, so I thought, and I can compose with that. But a few things happened. First of all, things did not go great. At besides discovering all these things and meeting some very cool people, you know, to say I grew as a person, I don't think is accurate. I don't think I grew till I got home. But it certainly was the catalyst for growth. You know, a lot of it was me. I would say most of it. It may not have been a great fit. For a variety of reasons that we don't need to get into. Again, this is sort of besides the point. But mostly, I mean, I thought of it as a vacation. And I didn't think of it as my one opportunity to, like, build a career. Of course, I still am doing that. But anyway. I was becoming, through various dynamics, largely fueled by my lack of seriousness and work. I mean, to be quite honest, those were basically the two things. I was losing enthusiasm for being there and sort of academia in general. I was also discovering a lot of, things about the world that were sort of supporting my belief that all these, well, I won't get into what my belief is because I don't want to, what my belief was, because it's not that anymore, is what I mean. So I'm not going to broadcast the aspersions that were in my head then that aren't there now. But, I was hurt by the fact that I wasn't more successful, and I could not face the fact that a big part of that was, and as I'm saying it out loud, it's probably the whole fucking thing, was I just didn't try hard enough. I just didn't work, and I didn't meet deadlines. I didn't do any of the stuff. I didn't go to the things that I had to go to, etc., etc., etc. I was not good. Anyway. And I couldn't take responsibility for it. That was the real problem. I didn't take responsibility for my lack of success. I blamed it on everything except for me, of course. That being said, I was loath to give up the idea of, like, writing music on paper for really super talented players that could create it. But it was also coming to my attention that like that world did not have the energy that I want in my life. Like I don't like the don't clap between movements thing. I don't like the be fucking silent during the piece thing. Like, make your piece interesting enough that people are awestruck. And then, you know, anyway, there's pros and cons, but it just wasn't the vibe for me. And but I just couldn't. I don't know. I don't know. So many failures. I don't need to go through them all right now publicly. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna bring it back to less personal stuff. Although I'm pretty open to share the personal stuff with the public. I think like otherwise it's a secret, and I don't like secrets. But it's just not. This isn't the place for it. Um. Anyway, so I move back, and I don't finish my degree, and I don't finish the Python project, and I don't feel like, well, so much happened, and you know, I broke emotionally in there. Um, and then, then I started healing, and you know, there's one very specific person that led me to that healing, and I am so grateful because so much for not getting personal, but breaking and healing saved my life, and in terms of it being wasted or not, I truly believe that, and thank God I found Steven, my therapist, because he's probably not right for most people, but he's right for me, and he helped me grow up, basically. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm on the way. Anyway, so the whole time that all that's going on, all sorts of personal drama and self-loathing and self-pity and blah 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 blah, self-destructive behaviors. Um, I have two obsessions, and I go back and forth between the two of them, and they are basically like cracking the data science lottery, whatever. All right, now my words are not starting to not work right, but figuring out how to use the computer to collect and analyze data to generate an income for myself by gambling on sports. That was the plan. Um, and the reason was because I want to use all my time to make music, but instead I used all my time doing that. It's just the most backwards. Anyway, not all my time, but too much, way too much. And then the second obsession that I had was figuring out how to use Super Collider to create this vision that Xenakis put such a clean point on, but that I had started to sort of get to even before that. But this vision of sort of real-time live composing. So it's not exactly clear even still what that means. And there's never going to be clear boundaries. I mean, all these things are vague boundaries. And I would substitute teach, and I would just bring, I would bring my little USB stick, which had a Mac OS installation on it, and I would boot the computers in the classroom up on that stick, and I would just do my work, and I would tell those kids to shut up and leave me alone. This is terrible, terrible broadcasting, but I've started this story, and I'm just gonna continue to talk till I can't anymore, because it's possible this is the only time that I'll ever be able to tell my story. I might die tomorrow, so I'm gonna tell it. So I'm working obsessively and obtusely, just banging my head against a wall that's not a wall, or whatever the analogy is. Like, not really understanding how Super Collider really is structured, and not having the discipline or really even the knowledge to say, no, I really have to understand. Like, how does the server work? How does the client talk to the server? I still don't really know the messaging protocol, honestly. But I know how the server works. I've got a pretty solid mental model of how the server works. And that's the part that makes the sound. So, there you go. There I go. Exactly. Anyway. And I'm a little bit sad that I threw out my notes about a year ago, basically right before I started doing this broadcast, which had all of my terrible ideas of how this could be structured. And then the first seeds of some of the good ideas. And maybe they weren't all terrible. Maybe they just weren't for me. Maybe, you know. Anyway, I'm sad that I threw them out, but I had to, because I had to clear my mind. And God, this fire has certainly cleared my mind and given me a reset, which it's very strange, but good. It's good. Like, I was done with that life, but who knows how long I would have taken to make the transition completely. Who knows if I ever would have? I don't know. Who knows if I still will? But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So in between, degenerate gambling and working jobs that I hated as little as I possibly could, and pretending that I'm still going to get my doctorate for no reason, because I already know I don't want to work at a university. I already know that because it's a government job, and I can't imagine a worse fit for me. So yeah, it's a really tough time. But oscillating between degenerate gambling, obsessive, like bordering on psychotic, like obsession with figuring out how to structure a framework to create this vision that I had that I just didn't know how to create at all. I didn't know the questions to ask to find out the questions to ask to get the answers. I was so far away, but I didn't know that I was that far away. Thank God. Or I never would have done it, probably. Really tough time. With many, many very joyful moments also. But just constantly spending as much time as possible, as much time as I could spare in my mind, on cracking this problem of how is it. Well, now I can articulate what the problem is very well, but then I didn't really even have the ability to articulate what the problem was. I just had this vision of, it was a vague vision, and I knew that because the music would be coming from the computer, I could that's where the other piece where Scriabin comes in, because of his synesthesia thing and his obsession with his idea of this, whatever his giant piece was supposed to be that he never got to make, incorporated lights and colors and whatever. It was this vision of being on stage and making composition decisions in real time, with making large scale, top level composition decisions in real time, with the small scale stuff being already automated by me, specific to whatever the piece is that I'm doing. So not just like random, but shaped. That's all I had. I was like, so, I'm going to be on stage. I'm going to have a bunch of different things, including a keyboard, including obviously my WX5. That's a MIDI wind controller, for those who don't know. somewhere along there, I got the idea. I went through a period of like trying to come up with like, well, trying to mix my artistic ideas with a business idea too early, probably. Um, but it was good. It was a good exercise because it really, especially trying to do the business plan, I really had to get serious about like, what do I care about? What is, if I were to have a business, like a, a business, well, if I were to have a business, what would that business be if I could choose? And that was a really good exercise to do. Um, but what I came up with through that process was sort of like this focus on exploration, um, because of my interest in just intonation, different tuning systems, um, like sort of so-called irrational tuning systems or whatever, so-called by me, I guess, just now. Um, but not just that, you know, my interest in sort of out there wild metric time related manipulations, both structures and distortions of that structure. I think I was already sort of thinking about. Um, and I knew that with enough skill, I would be able to create all the music I had ever dreamed of with Super Collider. That's what I believed. I'm not sure that I believe it now. In fact, I know that I don't because there's just no way to replace the human voice. If nothing else, that's undeniable. And I don't know. Maybe at some point AI tools will simulate that well enough to have this exact same mental effect. But I sort of don't think so. I sort of think that you can hear not just the human voice, but a person's, whatever you want to call it. Maybe you want to call it a soul, spirit, energy. There, you can hear them in their voice, and I sort of think you have to be a person, which is possible that will make people, inside of computers, but we're not there yet. And I mean, I'll cast my lot with David Deutsch in analyzing our uh, scheduled arrival at that point. Anyway, so if nothing else, that's irreplaceable. But so are all human musicians. I just don't think that you can program a computer to be expressive the way that you can ask a group of human individuals to be expressive. and build off each other. There's some cool things you can do. Similar to playing solo piano and playing the bass and the harmony and the melody. You can do a thing, and it is expressive, but it is one person expressing their one idea. And when you get four of those people that are on the same wavelength expressing with each other, it's just a different thing. And it doesn't have to be humans, but it has to be people in the sort of categorization of David Deutsch, where like a person is a universal explainer, and whatever. I'm not, maybe I'm not going to try to recreate all of David Deutsch's work off the top of my head, but in that sense. Okay, so that was a tangent. Basically, I'm deeply depressed. I don't know if that came out, but for a number of years, a good 2.5, 3 years, already maybe starting to drop into depression, maybe prior to going down to Florida, but certainly while I was there. Just just emotionally brutal times for me, for reasons that are almost exclusively my fault. Anyway, so I get back here, and I really fall into a deep depression, the deepest ever. In my life. God willing, the creek don't rise. No, I think there's no way I can go back there. There's no path that I'm gonna choose that goes back there. That's for sure. That being said, I was fine until I wasn't, briefly, and then I started to heal. Anyway, we went there. I'm sort of being intentionally vague, because my personal life is not really the topic of this discussion, but it definitely played a role of social isolation and obsession with this project. And okay, so that's where I was. So I have this vision of like, here I am, I'm on stage, I've got a computer, I've got a variety of control surfaces, control implements, traditional musical instruments, keyboards, MIDI controllers, knobs and sliders, also like touch screens. Also, at UM I was playing with like the gyroscopes, whatever they are, in the laptop. That was an interesting piece that I did, I guess. Silly, but sort of whatever. Meanwhile, I have 1,000 other ideas, over the course of 1,000 days, of like, maybe this is really the thing, or maybe this is really the thing, or maybe this is really the thing. Maybe I need to, build a crypto music thing, which was actually a very cool idea, but I didn't have. That I put the cart ahead of the horse with that, because I didn't have the music part. I didn't have the actual part that creates any of the music. between for people to manipulate. That was the whole crux of the whole idea. Anyway, lots of ideas, and I really wasn't sure that this was the one, but it's the one that stuck, and it's the one I kept working on. And it's the one I kept saying, this is, I think, a really key thing that I want to do with my life is like figure out how to level up. Not that composing at the current level is bad or worse or even worse than composing at this level. Maybe it's even better. But this is interesting. You know, at least it's different. It's going to create different music. So having this music and 100 million people making this music, and then like me making this music, doesn't mean that this music is better. It might actually end up being worse because of the lack of human performers, and of course I have ideas about how to get around that and how to actually have this system sort of spit out instructions to at the end instead of synths actually human performers. That's a problem I haven't exactly solved yet, and that would again be putting the cart before the horse, but yeah. So I have this idea of controlling all, I haven't really, I'm trying not to express what it's become. I'm trying to really remember what it was at that time. And it was, I want control of everything. Uh, Nietzsche, fucking eat your heart out. I want to control every little fucking expressive tweak that I can possibly imagine. I want to have it in front of me. That's what I wanted. I wanted total control. I wanted to be able to make by the way, total uh, uh, genre agnostic control. So, like, I wanted to be able to use this framework to compose Beethoven's 7.5 symphony live in front of people watching me do it, and also, Prince's at the time it would have been, well, the deep tract on 1999. It still is. It still is. And then some of the earlier hits. But yeah, anyway, I don't need to get into all my favorite Prince music, but do a framework to do both of those things. Oh, and this, okay, I'm going to take a tangent here because it is a super important tangent. In my in my adolescent through early adulthood, I was both, simultaneously going to classical music school and like really into going to these jam band shows, especially Mo. I, for obvious reasons, I preferred the Trey solo shows to the Fish shows, but that's a very personal thing. But that's the jam band scene was a huge influence on this vision specifically. But specifically Fish. I think maybe partially just because I met Trey. Um, but no, not that's not why. Well, it's not why. But they do a thing where they try actively to forget their assumptions about how music is constructed or what it consists of. You know, some of their deep jams are just so wild, and it's hit or miss. And honestly, for me, it's more miss than hit. But when they hit, it's electric. It's electric because there is a whole bunch of times when they miss. First of all, that's another thing that I learned that I sort of put together in Miami was, especially with that guy who was doing that very cool thing with, he was going into a TV. He had audio going into it, into the RCA inputs of the TV as like a visualization. But there was an excitement to it because he was doing everything live. And it had a real potential to be a disaster. Or was it the opposite? Was I like, actually, there was no potential? I don't remember. Anyway, I remember some connection there. Part of the reason why those, why when Fish hits, it hits with such electricity is because those are special moments. They happen once. Everybody knows they happen once. Uh, Also, there aren't many of them. For me, you know, like, but also for everybody. Like, you know, they are hit or miss because they are so. I mean, they are experiments, and they're expert improvisers. I mean, they're really great improvisers, and you know, you play with these guys for 40 years, and you get used to being able to improvise and go into the wild with them. That's pretty cool. Yeah, Fish is a huge influence, and the Light Show, for sure. You know, like being a part of the music is, that's where I saw that. Also with Mo had a pretty solid Light Show, but it's not the same as Fish. Um, that's just, it's another level, if I recall. So that was a tangent, and I don't remember where it came from, but so I'm in this dark place, and I'm have this vision that I don't know if it's a good idea. I'm still sort of in my mind trying to pretend that I'm going to get my degree and that that's somehow going to make my life different, even though I don't want to be a professor at a government institution. Um, yeah. And then I guess I feel the need to sort of say where it all sort of flipped And I know what it is. I know what it is. Perfect timing. So I don't remember the catalyst to why this day in 2019, the summer of 2019, somewhere it was around July, late June, July. I don't remember the catalyst. I mean, I felt trapped in a bad situation, and I didn't know how to get out. My dreams and visions were fading as falling into a dark place. And I think I just Googled, I don't remember what I Googled, but I just said like something like, how do I do things? It was something very simple. It might have been a little bit less to the point than that, but like how do I make my life better? It was something like that. I don't remember. Maybe it had specifically to do with money. I don't know, but I did a Google search to just like just sitting there at the end of my rope, not knowing how to be better. And I just Googled something to that effect. How can I make my life? How can I don't think I had the maturity to say like, how can I be better? But how can I make my life better? What? Why? Was something like that. And what popped up was Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And I read that book, and I didn't understand it completely, but I understood the first two chapters. And I guess the third one too is persistence, I believe. Sometimes I get them in the wrong order. I know it's desire and faith. I think the third one's persistence. And I decided, I made a committed decision that I was not going to be fucking mediocre anymore. That I was going to do this thing. And I wasn't sure even at the time what this thing was, but I knew that it was success, you know. And I couldn't even exactly define it, and that's of course one of the big things in that book. So I did define it, but not well and not accurately. Like it wasn't really the thing because, well, whatever. But I made a committed decision. I said that I made a number of committed decisions. Is the truth. I think I gave myself a year or something. It was like by July 4th, 2020 or something. I think it was. Um, XYZ, and I did not follow through with that. Um, of course, the world ended, and my world ended also as a result of my changed behavior. But the one committed decision that I did make was my fate is in my hands, and I'm not going to be mediocre anymore. And I wasn't sure exactly what that would entail. God, I mean, I don't think I could have done it if I knew how hard it was going to be. But I changed that day. That was one of the big days that I changed for the better. And I think that was a big piece of the ending of the situation that was so bad. Was I decided I'm not going to let this situation prevent me from becoming what I need to become, what I'm here to do, from doing what I'm here to do. And I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but I fucking knew for goddamn sure it wasn't what I was doing. And so 5 months later, not even 5 months, 3 months, yeah, 3 months later, I mean, that all went down in late August, early September, and I like sort of broke emotionally, and I quit all my jobs, all my bullshit fucking nonsense shit that was just not enough money. Even not anywhere close to enough money, especially if I was going to be paying fucking back on loans and shit. Just nowhere close to them. I mean, there was just like, what? Anyway, I quit all those jobs with no plan, of course. I mean, besides, I guess, having perfect timing at like, you know, figuring out exactly how to make money gambling was, I guess, my plan. I don't know. Turns out that didn't work out. And 3 months later, 3 months after my committed decision to not be mediocre, I was just completely broken emotionally, single, and unemployed, or about to choose to be unemployed. And 3 months after that, I was, well, I mean, homeless is not the right word because I didn't spend a single fucking night on the street. By the time I got kicked out of my apartment for not paying rent, I was back with an ex, and anyway, this is getting too personal, but yeah. And then I lived a number of years just, well, it was a complex situation, but I would like, I could be more proud of my behavior, is how I'll put it, and my actions during that time. I don't know if regret's the right word. I don't think that it is. I think it's okay that what happened because here I am, and I think I'm in a good place. And and specifically, I think I'm in a good place to create a lot of meaning for a lot of people. I hope. I mean, that's my goal. Um, it's it's very presumptuous to say that, but that's what it is. And I guess a lot of people would think it's just sort of, you know, superfluous. So I guess that's why I'm the right one for the job. But all right, I'm starting to go off on more tangents. So I make this committed decision, a number of committed decisions, but the one that I'm actually really committed to is I'm not going to be mediocre anymore. Period. And man, I remember that conversation that I had with Bob. And that was a strong one. It wasn't even, I mean, it was a little tense, but I remember saying those exact words to him. I am not going to be mediocre any longer. And that I fucking meant. I didn't mean the thing where I was going to have my fucking debt paid off in a year or whatever nonsense I wrote down on that paper. I fucking believed the shit out of what I said to Bob that day. I am not going to be mediocre anymore. And then I tanked the fuck out of my fucking life so hard. I just basically self-immolated. And I landed in a place. And I took advantage of some people. And somehow I managed. Well, in that time of tanking my life, the one thing that I did right was I said, man, something's not right here with me. And I had seen how therapy helped people. And had I not seen that, I never even would have considered it. But I saw it, and it was simple. And I was desperate, and I said, something's wrong, and I need help. And I fucking got it, dude. I fucking got it. I got the help that I needed. And I did so many things wrong for so long. But I did that one right, and I mean, that was another commitment that I made that I really kept. I mean, I don't miss an appointment. Every once in a while. I mean, in almost 5 years now, I've canceled maybe twice, maybe 4 times, something like that. 4 times is like, I think it's like twice. I don't even know if it's once. I mean, unless I had like COVID or something. I know that I can't. I canceled a couple times, but I don't think it's 4. Anyway, doesn't matter. Man, my tangents get further away. Every each one. So almost. 10 o'clock. So, um, where was I? So I tanked my life, and I started to heal, and I'm still degenerately gambling, and whenever I'm not doing that, or playing house, I'm obsessively trying to figure out how to make this vision happen. And I still don't really know what the problem is that I'm trying to solve. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to articulate it right at this particular moment, but why don't I give it a shot? This is not what I was thinking back then. This is the problem as I see it right now. The opportunity. A loose end from before is those composers who moved their fucking families to Darmstadt or wherever the fuck they did to have access to half of an Arduino Uno or less. God bless them. And now I have, the power of a million of those studios if I need it. If I have $20,000 or $30,000, I mean, I'm just spitballing the numbers. Who knows what they are? But I mean, just in orders and orders of multiple orders of magnitude more synthesis power and also expressive power. I mean, literally at my fingertips. That was a realization that I had when I started to first crack into understanding what Super Collider was, like the first year, first 6 months, 3 months, whatever. And it felt like an injunction. I don't know if that's the right word. It felt like, first of all, I'm the only one, it seemed, who understood that properly. And so it would be a failure to just let that knowledge die. That's how I felt. It would be a travesty. It would be like spitting. God, I wish I could remember that guy's name. Music concrete guy. I almost had it. Anyway, it would be like spitting in his face. If I saw like, oh, I have this tool that's a million times more powerful than anything that those guys 30 years ago ever could dream of. And I'm just going to ignore it or not use it to its full potential. It felt like a real responsibility that I had to say, I understand what this tool is. I didn't really, but I thought that I did. Which is probably still true. I understand what this tool is, and I'm one of the few people who do. And I'm uniquely qualified to become an expert at using this tool to do all the things that those guys would have done but couldn't dream because they were just so limited in the technology that they had. It's hard to say. This is a digression of tremendous width, but maybe I lost it. Yeah, I lost it. Anyway. Yeah, my functionality may have come to a close. Let me finish the story, though. What's the question? What's the opportunity that I'm trying to exploit here? It is it's something like the computer is a general purpose tool, but nonetheless, the most powerful the most powerful and potentially, not yet, potentially the most expressive on account of its power, potentially the most expressive musical instrument ever created. That's the insight. That's the key insight. That I think that my career really will end up being obviously hinged upon. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's something that I take for granted that other people will see. But for me, that was the key insight. The computer is a musical instrument, and it can operate on multiple levels of it can operate on multiple levels at the same time. It can operate in like a kinetic way where you hit a button and it creates a sound. Obviously, synthesis is a lower level than that. Um, and then there's higher levels of organizational levels. Um, and in that way, it is different in kind to any other musical instrument that's ever been used, or any other tool for that matter. Um, you know, from a larger perspective, my sort of understanding of the context that we're in as humans is it's possibly so my initial thought in this vein was that the internet was the big thing, that the internet was the revolution. I think that's a little convenient that it happens to be the thing that was invented in my lifetime. And I think it really is just an extension of harnessing electricity. I don't actually know the whole history of it. I think it was maybe the 1800s, maybe the 1700s. I guess 1700s. Um, but I think harnessing electricity is akin to harnessing fire. Like, in its revolutionary effect on the human species and our civilization, whatever you want to call it. Sure does feel like a pretty radical shift. And I think most of the world has not caught up yet. Maybe all of it. I'm rambling. This is bullshit. This is bullshit. I think lost my ability to make sense. Um there's something there though, but I can't articulate it. The point is, it's more than just that it's the most powerful uh, musical instrument ever invented. It's more than that. It's different kind of instrument of it's a different kind. It's different in kind, as I already said. Um, and all the ways that it's different in kind are maybe still unclear to me. I know that the ability, well, I mean, a pianist is making, who's improvising, is making formal decisions. However, yeah, it it doesn't have to, but it can operate at a higher compositional level as an instrument, where it's not where ah this is a good way to put it. It's not a tool for making sound only. It can be that, obviously, but it can also be a tool for making musical decisions or making instead of making sound, it's making form, making meaning, making, I don't know. It is making musical decisions, though. More than just making sound. It's different. Previous musical instruments make turn human motion input in the form of either a bow or a strike or a air movement into sound and provide expressive controls over what that sound is. The computer is different in kind, and the way that it's different in kind is that it can also, besides doing that, it can simultaneously be a tool for automation of musical decisions, which is a different thing altogether. And there are losses, for sure. Not having a human being operating the touch of a specific instrument is a giant loss. It's a huge, huge, huge loss of expression. And so, therefore, the expression gained by being able to operate at a higher level, well, it doesn't have to equal it. It can just be different. It's fine. It's a different way to make music. That's the crux of it. It's not the same. It's different, and that's fine. The same way Conlon Narancaro's, using the player piano is a different way to make music. I don't know. I'm getting very, very rambly, and I apologize. I do want to finish, though, the story. To the best of my ability. So part of the thing that I had to learn is like, what exactly is it that the computer can do? Specifically, I knew it could do everything, but what exactly is it that I can do that I couldn't do before? That wasn't entirely obvious. What is it that's worth doing? I mean, there's 100,000 different things I could do that I couldn't do before. What is it that's worth doing? That's the fucking key. And I didn't understand that that's what I was looking for exactly, but that's what I was looking for. And somewhere along the way, after I started my healing, I, well, this gets into deep philosophical stuff, but that's who I am. And that's who I am as a person, it's who I am as an artist. So, yeah. I read a number of books. Um, but specifically Maps of Meaning. That, well, specifically that, and a few specific conversations with Steven about music and why, what the point of it was. Um, he didn't exactly say it, or maybe he did. He might have just said it, but it's an expressive. Art is meant to express something, to make people feel things. To connect people. He didn't say that. Steven didn't say that. I came up with that. That's the biggest source of meaning, is the connection and the identification. Anyway, through a variety of philosophical inquiries, centered around Maps of Meaning, which led me to Moby Dick. And Viktor Frankl is in there somewhere. It's very possible that Maps of Meaning led me there also. Although anyway, I don't remember. But I discovered that meaning, whatever that means, really is the thing to aim for. And so at that time, I construed my object, my aim, as how can I use the computer to create the most meaningful musical experiences that I can imagine possible. Like, how can I create a framework which will facilitate me creating the musical experiences I can vaguely sort of envision, which I believe will be super meaningful for me and other people. And the answer to that question, I believe, is expression. And not expression of what you want people to see or what you want people to think about you, but expression of the most I don't know, how do I put it? It has to be expression that is integrally a part of expressing something about from who you are with integrity, and really it's comes down to vulnerability and openness, and the willingness to be seen. Not physically, although that also, but the willingness to allow people to perceive who you are through the music somehow. I guess it doesn't have to be personal expression, because there's things that I want to express that aren't personal. I mean, in a sense, it's sort of my personal understanding of this thing that we're all part of. So in that sense, I guess it is personal. But anyway, the answer to how do I create maximal meaning through music, which is my talent, my special gift, and the answer is be vulnerable. Be transparent. Be open. And express something that's meaningful to you. You know? Express the meaning of, express something meaningful, whether that's the love that you feel for somebody, or you know, the opposite of that, I guess, you know, or anything in between, and laterally, or whatever. You know, in a sense, I am trying to express my worldview in the intricate, in the details of how the music is structured. You know, the opening paragraph of that chapter of Moby Dick, where it's talking about weaving, and the one direction is the forward progression of time, and the shuttle is the individual weaving their way, making decisions, blah blah, blah, and the thwacking of the chants. That's a piece of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's a piece of it. The self-similarity, also a piece of it. Anyway, I'm not going to get into trying to eloquently express that idea right now, but that's a part of what I'm trying to do. However, it has, I learned or decided or something, realized correctly or not, I don't know, that the way yeah. So, I mean, I guess in a way, this video right now is the culmination of that process. Of the answer is to be open and vulnerable, which doesn't mean you have to tell your whole life story on an internet stream necessarily. but specifically in my music, in creating music, I need to be open and vulnerable and express whatever it is that I'm feeling, I guess. Well, I don't know. It's not as simple as that, but it is certainly allowing yourself to be seen and not and seen for who you really are. That's a piece of it. And so I guess this is a bit of a bit of a practice in that. Doing just talking by myself for 2 hours and 20 minutes so far, about my life story and etc. Without complete, you know, with, well, whatever. Um, okay. So there's sort of also the other side of it, which is the technical, like logistical side of how do I actually fucking make this happen? And by this, I mean, how is it that I make that I can how hmm, how can I build a framework so that I can sit down a framework and a collection of equipment and whatever so that I can sit down, I can go to a gig or just sit down and stream on the internet or whatever and I have all the tools that I need to really create anything that I could possibly imagine. Any sort of sound world, any sort of like this is how I'm feeling and I really want to express this XYZ. Like as soon as I'm able to, of course a piece of art is the biggest piece of it is deciding what to do. But once I've decided what to do, how can how can I build the tools that will allow me to create that expression in my mind of which the ideas one of my perhaps my greatest gift is that I never fucking run out of ideas. The the bad side of that is I don't always know which ideas are the ones that I should pursue, and that has been the problem of my life. But I think I'm better at that now. I hope. Um, but the idea is that because I am uniquely gifted with what seems to me now to be a never ending stream of musical ideas, which I can't possibly keep up with by hand. How is it that I can create a framework leveraging the computer where I'm able to create the ideas in real time in performance, improvising, if it when necessary, um, sort of as they occur to me. that's also the way the way towards the most music, um, is to just do it, is to just improvise every fucking day of your life for 6 hours or 12 or whatever. Call it 6. Um, Anything else is at least one order of magnitude less expression. Um, well, at least an order of magnitude less music in terms of time, you know. Anyway, and I think I've come up with a pretty fucking great framework, and I'm just a little bit too wonky to and don't really have the energy to go into all the details. I'm not in the right place, but that's the thing, and that's my story. All right, good enough. Good enough. Oh well, I mean, and then blah 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 blah, heal heal heal. Uh, fuck up, fuck up, fuck up, learn learn learn, or whatever. That's how it goes. Um, and then I started this broadcast, or rather, no. This is all one fucking giant tangent on why is it that I only want to use the server. Okay, so this is the reason why. Because if everything's on the server, then everything is easily connectable. That's the reason. It's as simple as that. It's if there's a parameter that I might want to change with my hands, make that happen. But don't do it on the client, because then that's the top level. The client's the top level. I don't want to ever be going back and forth between the client, server, client. Um, Level by level, my shoes are fucked. Because there's latency, there's race conditions, there's all sorts of stuff I don't want to deal with. If everything's on the server, everything's in sync, everything's in order. But most importantly, if the controls that I'm doing with my hands, keys, saxophone, turning knobs, joysticks, foot pedals, whatever it is, if the method of transmitting that control to the system of the sound creation exists on the server, then it can then also be automated. So by putting the current top level on the server, then that can become the second top level, or whatever. I can sort of layer on and have this sort of hierarchical control, which I just think is so fucking cool, but also incredibly powerful. And I think if I do it right, I think it can be just so expressive and surprisingly expressive. Well, I'll get into all that later, but the whole point is by abstracting the input to the system, well, by making the parameters that are adjusted by humans, by putting those values on the server, then I can create a level on top of that also on the server. I could do it a level on top of that on the client too, but then that's the top level. If I want to go higher than that, I mean, there are stupider ways to do it, but the right way to do it is to take what I'm doing on the client and move it over to the server and have that be another level. And that's why everything has to go on the server. It also just, it makes setup harder. It makes the programming not as, especially since I didn't really know how the server worked, not as clear. But now that I understand it, everything is so much cleaner. And works. And is reliable. That's the other thing. Is that the synths run at a constant CPU rate. So it's never going to be a thing where, like, you trigger a bunch of notes and all of a sudden the fucking thing crashes. Like, it doesn't work that way. Whether the notes are triggered or not, everything's still doing the calculations. So I didn't even realize it until I said it out loud. I probably did. I don't know. I think I did. Like, understand that it's way more stable. Yeah, I did understand that. But what I didn't realize was that it's an even bigger deal. It's as big of a deal as being able to continue to build layers. Is it's fucking solid. It won't crash. You know. So anyway, so somewhere earlier this year, 2024, January 2024, February 2024, really, I realized, I mean, and by the way, this whole time, over this whole span of since I'm introduced to Super Collider, and then, well, not since I'm introduced to Super Collider, but like when I make the connection between Xenakis, his idea, my previous ideas of like sort of how process music could work, the sort of general concept of treating parameters as different parameters of whatever as separate and building connections between them that are less than traditional. All that stuff, when I sort of came to that vague aim that I've been trying to express, I mean, I'm just iterating. And I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but I'm just, okay, I'm gonna make this work, and then I try one way, and I get 75% done, and I say, yeah, that's not gonna work because X, Y, Z, and so now I have to try again. I must have made, I don't know, at least, I mean, at least 5 separate attempts, possibly 10. I have no way of counting. It's sort of hard to delineate where real total resets, probably real total resets are like around 4 or 5, and then, you know, some less serious resets in there too. I don't know. Especially the last couple years. I mean, I've probably done 5 in the last 3 years. So, I don't know. A shitload of iteration. and really not even close. I mean, there was one system which was like sort of did a cool thing, but again, like I was always up against it because whatever I did, it was the top level because I was working on the client. I did not understand how the server in Super Collider worked. It's as simple as that. And I just was, I don't know, too lazy? I don't even think it was lazy. I was working at it fucking 10 hours a day, but just not wise enough to say, let me back up, let me understand this from the ground up, and then I'll know what to do better. Anyway, I didn't understand how the server worked, so I had to do everything on the client. I didn't even really understand that I could have moved everything over to the server for years and years and years. Basically, until I realized that I had to. It never really occurred to me. But that was that was a giant, giant problem because whatever I did, like there was one time when I was fucking living in the winter in a fucking RV. I mean, what the fuck? That was crazy. Crazy times, but also super cool. I mean, I figured out a lot in that iteration. I remember so well. I mean, yeah. The I forget what exactly I called it, but the percussion controller that I've been re-implementing over and over and over. Oh, I gotta stop soon. I basically figured that out there, and then I forgot about it a little bit. But there were two things. There was the percussion thing there, which basically worked. There was a crude version of like harmonicity as a dual. This one was actually very close, and I probably could have made some pretty cool music with it actually if I hadn't immediately restarted as soon as it started to make noise. Um, there was a very cool pitch selection algorithm, which I'm still is going to be part of the system for sure. Maybe a more complex, more useful, expressive version of it, but like the idea of you know of selecting pitches based on the intersection of two dimensions, the intersection of two inputs, randomized. So the first input is one input is contour, which is just basically it's fucking obvious what it is. I use a central frequency, and it has and you know you choose you weight you you weight the possible pitches by how close they are to that central frequency, and then you select. And so that's like a probabilistic contour. Um, and then the other piece is like the harmonic context and what and harmonicity is what I was doing then. It was a single scale, which is not what I'm going to do now. But the concept of one input for contour, another input for harmony, and select probabilistically around that intersection to a greater or lesser degree, or with a greater or lesser like sort of spread. You get good spread. Both of those ideas came from that one iteration. And those are both really powerful ideas, I think, and will be part of this final, of this iteration. But I think for a long time will play a role in my music. But yeah, it was this pattern of work constantly, you know, whenever it was that you could stand to not be, wasting your time gambling, basically. God, how much fucking wasted time. But anyway, what I would do is I would obsess over making the perfect system that would just create the music with no more effort from me. It was what my goal was. Even after I started to heal, that was still sort of, I still sort of carried that through for a long time, without questioning the assumption there. But I would basically write the whole thing. It would start to work as designed, and then I would see that it was just too limited to create my vision. And I'd start over. And I must have done that at least 10 times. Now that I really think about it and do the math, I mean, at least 10. And it was brutal. It was brutal every time. It was such a huge disappointment. Like, oh. And the key to it, I believe that what was happening was I was working on the client, and no matter what I did, no matter what I wrote, that was the top level. So there was nowhere to go from there. And it was also, the code was just horrendous. I mean, just totally unreadable, uneditable. I mean, I did not have any fucking clue what I was doing. I mean, for a long time, I didn't even know how to write a class in Super Collider. I was just like writing functions or something. I don't even fucking remember what I was doing. Oh my god, dude. Oh, it's so embarrassing. I was, I was controlling the timing of musical events with a system clock on the fucking client and global variables. And so that was the top level. No matter how I designed the system, there was always something missing. And if there was something missing, then the whole thing was over, because I couldn't add anything because the code was so terrible, first of all, that I couldn't change it once I had forgotten how it worked. Which was easy to do because it was not well written, well conceived. And then I couldn't, or at least it didn't occur to me that to do so. I couldn't add another level because I was already at the client. So in February, late January, early February, here's another piece of the story, and it's a pretty important piece, and it's not musical, but it has to do with the creative process. Um, One of the things I discovered was the double diamond process, and I use it for almost everything now. Not just music and art, but all my programming projects, um, life. I mean, dating. I've done a few different double diamonds on like how I can improve my dating life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything in my life. I do the double diamond with. I find it to be one of the greatest pieces of knowledge that I've acquired. Um, and I believe that that is what eventually led me, after a few different tries. I think I did the double diamond a couple times before it got me to, oh, everything should be on the server, because if everything's on the server, then I can just keep adding layers. And that's what I want to do. If something, if in one piece, if in part of a piece I'm want to control something with a knob, I want to be able to tell a synth to control that knob in expression and in coordination with other things. That's what I want. So that's why everything's on the server. And what's so cool about that, I think, anyway, is that at that point when I finally, like, it clicked in my brain, oh, I could just put this all on the server. And if I figure out how to do that, that's the way to do it. Because then everything is clean, everything is together, everything is synced. It's just and it's solid. It's uncrashable. I mean, the server isn't gonna crash without additional input from the client, is what I mean to say. Like, I can still crash the server by trying to do too much on it, but once I have the server set up, it won't crash because there's too many notes or something. So that's very cool. I think maybe do demand rate things change that equation a little bit? It might. It does. It has to. Anyway, it's way more stable. Race conditions aren't a thing. Timing is gonna be. And then I've just discovered that it opens up a whole, an infinite world of possibilities. Anyway, when I finally realized, like, oh, this is how the server works, and oh, I can put everything on there, and that's how these pieces should be constructed. I got there through the double diamond, and when I started to say I'm going to do everything on the server, and that's how it's going to be, then I started broadcasting, and it was the night of February 29th. I was on a skiing trip in Vermont. I believe it was Sugarbush, if I'm not mistaken. I brought a laptop, the old shitty MacBook Pro of almost the exact identical fucking vintage to this one. Maybe it was one that was a little later and didn't have a CD thing, but I think it was the one with the CD. Did they both have a CD drive? I don't know. Anyway, and then I documented my trial and error and stupid misunderstandings and learnings and whatever. I just didn't work on it without broadcasting. And now I have, and now everybody has the archive of like how I learned to use the server in Super Collider in this way that I'm gonna do to make the music. And I think there's different paths there, by the way. That could be offshoots that I could have taken and I didn't. And maybe I take them later, or more likely, or just as likely, somebody says, well, why didn't you go that way? And they take that path, and that's great. But I think it's pretty cool that there's an archive of the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and fucking goddamn hundreds of hours of trial and error and just blankly staring at the screen with no fucking clue why something I'm trying to do isn't working because I don't know how it works. And that's what this has been, is me learning how the server works, basically. The other piece of it is, what is it? There's a limited amount of input that I can produce myself from my body, which is the only way I can produce input live. I can receive input from other places, audiences, and other musicians, and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But there's a limited amount there's a limited amount of control data that can go in. And so, besides learning how to use the server, I was also refining my idea of what it is that I should be controlling. And for a long time, I struggled with trying to come up with a single answer for all time. And I don't think that's the way. I think that for a specific piece, each piece may have, well, I believe that there are objects, musical objects, which have identities. Object's not the right word, but there are musical identities. A melody is one. A motive is one. A melodic fragment is one. A chord is one. A chord progression is also a higher level one. A harmonic system is a higher level than that. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. So there's these musical identities. Oh, and so maybe a piece is a combination of three, or whatever. I don't know. It's an infinite combination, but from my perspective as the creator, like this as the composer, there's like a piece which is basically, I'm rambling, but Well, I guess it's still a little bit of an open question what to control, but I think there's competing there's competing values here because one consideration is that I would like the performance to have one piece of equipment do one thing so that it's clear what's happening when I'm doing a thing, what it is that I'm controlling, and people get used to seeing it. The other thing, the other competing value here is in order to be flexible, really flexible, to be really able to do anything I can conceive, like different musical ideas will require different types of input data. Anyway, I'm so fucking exhausted and I've been talking for 3 fucking hours and I'm not even sure that any of it made sense. But anyway, that's a chunk of my story. I'm trying to be, well, that's a chunk of my story. More to come.